Hello and welcome to another manga spotlight. This is the reincarnated marriage of a hero and a sage. After becoming engaged to a former rival, we become the strongest couple. This is by Fujiki Washiro and Nishi Riku. And as you can tell by that really long name for the title, this is a series based off of a light novel. And the light novel is by Fujiki Washiro, and Nishi Riku does the illustrations for this. So let's just read the basic premise here. Reid, a young hero with the strongest physical strength, and Elria, a beautiful sage with the strongest magical prowess. They continue to fight as rivals in opposing enemy nations, but the relationship came to an end with the sudden death of Elria. Then 1,000 years later, reincarnated in a world where magic reigns supreme. But he who has retained the strongest physical strength from his previous life, Reid, was reunited with Elria, who also has been reincarnated. Hey, Reid, I want you to marry me. Huh? The two, who have become the strongest unaware lovey-dovey couple in 1,000 years, enrolled in the Royal Magical Academy to decide who is stronger. We have our main character, Reid, and Reid is a hero for the Altian Empire. He is a man with physical prowess. He has fought thousands of fights and battles. He's never lost a single one. Meanwhile, we have Elria, and Elria is an elf, and she's a sage. She uses magical powers. And she's with the Vegelta army. And these two armies are opposing each other. And so we have the two of them on opposite sides of the field, and they constantly fight each other. And it kind of becomes a thing where they start developing a respect towards each other. And even that respect turns into friendship, as much as two people from opposing armies can become friends, anyways. But basically, they just fight each other constantly, and there's never really any winner. They're pretty much evenly matched, and they've done this for 50 years. In fact, when we start off the manga, Elria says that this will be our 629th battle, and so they fight each other, and that's when they're the most happiest, is when they're together. And then we cut to 50 years later, and throughout these 50 years, they've been fighting constantly, almost every single day. And unfortunately, Reid, who's now an older gentleman, he receives the news that Elria has died. That's basically she died from some kind of illness or something. Reid doesn't believe that, though. He's kind of dumbstruck because Elria is an elf. Elves have large lifespans, while Reid is just a human. So he figured that I would be the one to die first. I can't believe this. This is the sage, the only person who's ever been able to hold her own against me. There's no way that she can die from some little illness, right? I got to see this for myself. So he leaves, and he charges at the Volgata castle. And as he's doing this, everyone believes that Reid is going to attack them, that he's taking this moment of, hey, our hero is down for the count. He's now going to take advantage of that, and he's going to destroy us. So they attack him. So he's rushing through them, and they're hitting him with arrows, hitting him with spells, slashing at him with swords, and he's just going through them. He's trying to knock out the ones that are really getting in the way, but he's not trying to kill any of these people. And it's because there's a very specific reason he's doing this. Eventually, he's able to make his way into where Elria's body is at. And he basically tells everyone, I'm going to die the way I want to, and I'm not going to die until I'm done talking to her, so get the hell out of my way. And so he kneels down, and he just basically says his farewells to her. That he really can't believe that she's dead, that it looks like you're going to come back at any moment. That all the guys that you raised, the guys that you built up in your army, they're all strong, but none of them were as strong as you. And he just basically says, you were incredible. Even now, there are people who still look up to you. In the end, I'm just sad that we couldn't decide who was stronger. I enjoyed fighting with someone like you for over 50 years. And if we were in different positions, I'm pretty sure we could have been friends. And then he dies because the attacks that he sustained on his way to see Elria just got to him. And so after he says his goodbyes, he bleeds out right next to her body. And so rather than going to heaven or anything like that, he wakes up as a baby. This is a character who lives in the fantasy world from the get-go, dies, but then gets reincarnated 1,000 years later. The world has changed. The Altian Empire that Reid was in charge of, or at least that he was a soldier for, has lost. They lost the war in the end, and they basically were sucked up by the Vegelta kingdom. And magic has now become a thing that everyone can pretty much use. Reid grows up in this small village without any magical powers, but he still retains the physical prowess that he had back when he was a hero. And so he just grows up 18 years as a villager, doing farm work, taking out any monsters that happen to, encroach on this village. Meanwhile, Elria is born into a noble family. She also ends up getting reincarnated, but she doesn't become reincarnated as an elf. Instead, she's also a human now. She believes, like, you know what? Since I got reincarnated, maybe Reid got reincarnated as well. So she has spent her entire life going through all the newspapers from all the different kingdoms and countries and stuff, just trying to see if there's any mention of Reid, like if he would ever pop up. And eventually, one day, he shows up in the newspaper. And it's just something as simple as they're chopping down trees, and Reid discovers that there's a squirrel inside one of the trees. And this squirrel is like a new species. I guess these people have never seen squirrels before. So they decide, hey, this is going to be a great discovery. Let's call the newspaper company. And so because this new species was discovered, he gets in the newspaper. Elria eventually sees it, and she decides to send a notice to the village that she's going to show up, specifically to see Reid. Yeah, everyone's like freaking out. They're all wondering, like, what the hell did Reid do to bring this princess over? I don't know if I want to use the word princess because she's kind of a princess. She's basically a noble lady, I guess you can say. Her family are nobles, but they're not necessarily kings and queens and stuff. They're not like in charge of a kingdom in a sense. They're just nobles. But again, everyone's like, why is she here? Why does she want to see this kid? What the hell did he do? Is he in trouble? Are we in trouble? But eventually, the two of them meet, and Reid is shocked to see Elria. And yeah, I love like the expressions that Nishiriku does for these characters, especially for Elria. Like, he just makes her like look so freaking adorable at times with her reactions. Because at first he treats her like a stranger in the sense that he's like, have we met before? And then it turns out he's kind of pranking her. He's like, are you looking for a guy who was a hero? Which is in regards to what his position was in their previous life. Yeah, they're both like just surprised that they've been reincarnated, and they decide, okay, well, let's make sure that we are who we think we are. So they go out, and Elria is going to cast a magical spell on Reid, and Reid has to dispel it because the Reid in her previous life was able to do that. However, Reid says that, I can't use any magic, so I'm not going to be able to dispel it with magic, but I can dispel it with my physical powers. And so, yeah, she casts a fireball, and he punches it, dispelling it, and they realize, like, oh my god, like, this is it. Like, we've met each other again, and now we are no longer on opposite sides of the field. Like, there's no opposing armies that we are a part of, so now we can become friends. And I even find it kind of adorable that Elria has kept track of how many times they fought each other, which is 6,329 times. And throughout all that time, they've never been able to figure out which one of them is the strongest. And so they just kind of catch up on their lives, what they've been doing. And Elria discovers, well, I want Reid to stay by my side. I want him, like, I'm about to go to this magical school, this Royal Academy, and I want him to come with me so that we can continue our fights. Because that's one of the things that she absolutely enjoyed in her previous life, and something that she's missed in this life is fighting Reid. The problem is that Reid doesn't have any magical powers, so he can't go to this school, because only people with magical powers can go. However, there's a loophole, and that loophole is that if you come from a noble family, you're allowed to go to the school regardless of what your magical powers are. You can have a lot of magical powers, you can have a little. It doesn't matter what your level is, as long as if you're from a noble family. So that's when Elria decides, okay, let's get married. I want you to marry me. And her thinking is that, well, if he's married to me, then he becomes part of my family. And if he becomes part of my family, then he is allowed to go to this school. And if he's allowed to go to the school, then me and Reid can fight each other anytime we want. And that's when they've had their funnest in the past. The only times they were like really, really, truly happy in their previous life was when they were fighting each other. And so now that they've met each other again, there's nothing stopping them from fighting each other, from having just friendly spars. Now they don't. Now they just don't have to worry about an actual war. They can just do it for fun. So yeah, her idea is let's get married. There's also just the fact that she has feelings for him, and he has feelings for her too. So the marriage is like convenient, but it's also kind of an excuse to get what she really wants. But he agrees, and so they become engaged, and the two of them are able to start going to this royal academy that's going to teach them about magic. And from then on, it's kind of like your typical manga series that you'll see in like a lot of isekai. While this isn't technically an isekai, it does share a lot of the same tropes that other isekai have. The whole like fantasy world, being teleported into a different world, only instead of our heroes being teleported into a different world, it's them being teleported 1,000 years into the future. But the world has changed, so it is kind of like a different world, though not really. But there's like stuff like that. And then your typical, like, here's a student going to Magic Academy. He doesn't have magic powers, so some people look down on him, others don't, yada yada. Your kind of cliche stuff. They go on adventures and stuff. Yeah, a lot of that kind of stuff is a little bit cliche. But again, that's not the big selling point for this series. The big selling point for the series are two main characters and their relationship together, as well as them trying to figure out what happened to their world, or I should say what happened to their history, as well as why are they here. So eventually, like, they discovered that the Altian Empire, like, a lot of its history is kind of lost. And also the history between Elria and Reid has been kind of changed over time. And so Reid wants to realize, like, he wants to discover, like, what happened to my people. And then eventually he finds out that one of his generals has been reincarnated. And so now he's like, okay, well, I was reincarnated, Elria was reincarnated, one of my generals was reincarnated. Are there more people from back then that have been reincarnated? Why have we been reincarnated? What's going on here? And so it kind of just becomes a little bit of a mystery about them trying to figure out what happened to their people and stuff. But most of the focus is just on the two of them and their relationship. And it's an interesting relationship. It's very lighthearted. You don't get any drama. If you look at the tags for the series in the beginning of the video, you'll notice that there's no drama tag. And yeah, that's because there really is no drama. Everything is very lighthearted, kind of comedic, more focused on the comedy, adventure, and some relationship aspects thrown in. That's kind of nice. Like, if you're one of those people that, like, you want to see a relationship blooming without any drama and unnecessary angst, well, then here's a series for you. But yeah, I enjoyed this overall. Artwork is good. The action scenes are fine. I don't have any problems. There's no like trouble following along or anything like that. That's been some problems with some other manga series that like they might have really good artwork, but there's still trouble following the action scenes. Nothing like that here. The characters are interesting. I've read a bunch of fantasy mangas, a bunch of isekai mangas, and again, while this is not isekai, it does share some of the same kind of tropes. Not necessarily with the whole like status screens, harems, anything like that, but just the whole living in a fantasy world. There's magic, there's monsters, going to a magical school to learn how to use your magic, and then stuff that kind of goes along with that. The whole adventures and stuff. Not necessarily any guilds, but taking quests and things. So some similarities there, but it's mostly the two characters that are the big selling point in their relationship with each other. So I recommend checking it out. I'll leave a link down in the description below where you can read the manga for yourself. And if you click that link, it'll take you to the Manga Dex page. And the Manga Dex page is for any mangas that are adapted from a light novel. There's always a link where you can read it. It's called Novel Updates. You'll see it on the page. And you can just click that if you want to read the actual light novel. But yeah, I recommend checking out the manga. It's interesting, especially like if you like fantasy stuff, or if you're just looking for some lighthearted romance without a bunch of drama and things. This is a series for you. But there you go. There's The Reincarnated Marriage of a Hero and a Sage. After becoming engaged to a former rival, we became the strongest couple. And I hope you enjoyed, and hope to see you next time. Take care. Later.